Good evening. I'd like to call to order the June 19th, 2023 Special Common Council meeting. The time is 5:30. I'd like to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Kim Smith,
Present.
Sean McAllister,
Present.
Dan Stevens,
Present.
Stephen Knott,
Present.
Leanne Stokes. Here. Larry Jurassic,
Present.
Diane Wolf. Here.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 2, approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. This would be the last Common Council meeting. Would someone like to approve it?
I will make a motion to approve minutes from previous meeting. Second.
We have a motion on the floor by Stephen Knott. It's been seconded by Larry Jurassic to approve the minutes from the previous council meeting. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The minutes are approved. Item 3 is public input. This is opportunity for members from the public to address the Common Council this evening. If you would like to do so, please begin by stating your name and your address and limit your comments to 3 minutes per individual. Would anyone like to address the Common Council this evening? Second call for anyone wishing to address the Common Council this evening. Third and final call for anyone wishing to address the council this evening. Public input is now closed, and I'll move on to item 4, ordinance 1766-2023 to amend 7.04.23 of Title 7 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Onalaska relating to prohibited animals. Maybe turn to our, you want to put a motion on the floor, Stephen, or we can ask?
Well, a clarification beforehand. Is it 1767 or 1766 for the ordinance? Because we've got the ordinance number is 1767 on the agenda at 1766. The impact of ordinance is 1767. So one of them is incorrect. I just want to find out which is which.
It's 1767.
Okay, good to go. Thanks.
Okay, let that stand corrected at 1767. We can put a motion on the floor, or we can ask the attorney to introduce the item.
I'll move to approve ordinance number 1767-2023. Second.
A motion on the floor by Stephen Knott. It's been seconded by Sean McAllister to approve ordinance 1767-2023. Any discussion, Stephen?
One minor, under 7.04.23 sub A sub 1, where it says any poisonous or dangerous carnivorous animal or reptile. I'm going to make a motion here shortly for an amendment that we move pigeons from that category and put it under the domestic farm animals. That's the next paragraph. Because I think it fits better there than under poisonous, dangerous, carnivorous, or reptiles. Just to make a little clarity. I know it's not a big deal, but so I'm going to go ahead and make a motion for an amendment to remove pigeons from 7.04.23 paragraph A1 and move it to A2.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have an amendment on the floor. It's been made by Stephen Knott, seconded by Leanne Stokes. Is there discussion? Amanda, did you want to weigh in on that as the attorney?
I don't have a problem with that. I do think it makes more sense under the domesticated farm animal section.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on the amendment? Okay, we'll vote first on the amendment to move pigeons into the other category. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So we're back to the original motion to approve this ordinance. Is there any other discussion? Alder Stevens?
This question might be more for Amanda. If there's any changes to prohibited animals in the future, how would that process be addressed? And the only reason I bring that up is there's a reference here to 7.0413, and just this week I've had a call from somebody that wanted to review the chicken ordinance and make some potential changes. I'm not endorsing or denying that, but how might that process, would this ordinance have any effect on future review of ordinances?
I mean, it's not uncommon for us to tie ordinances together. So as far as this ordinance goes, this ordinance exempts chickens allowed under 70413. So if we made changes to 70413, that would just carry through, like the reference would carry through. So whatever those changes would be, would still be allowed. If we were no longer to allow chickens at all, then we would want to go back and change this. The only other thing would be if we did expand the animals that we allowed and created a new section where, for instance, maybe we suddenly allowed ducks, that could impact this ordinance where we would have to amend it. But it's really no different than, that happens in other ordinances as well.
Sure. So just for clarification, any tweaks that we make in the future, this would not affect that.
No.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. The motion on the floor is to approve ordinance 1767. Voting is by roll call, right? It's ordinance.
You can do roll call. Dan Stevens,
I,
Stephen Knott,
Aye.
Leanne Stokes,
Aye.
Sean McAllister,
Aye.
Diane Wolf,
Aye.
Larry Jurassic.
Aye.
Thank you. This ordinance passes unanimously. Item 5 is purposes to establish council budget goals and objectives for the 2022 budget. With that being said, I'll turn the discussion over to our acting city administrator, Amanda Jackson.
All right, bear with me. Okay, well, it worked, kind of. All right, so 2024 budget. So just to kind of set our goals for tonight, what we're doing is we're going to try to establish priorities for the 2024 budget. And then we're going to look at a few things related to just budgeting in general. And I'd like to set sort of priorities for the long-term budget discussion. Like, we don't want to necessarily decide anything tonight related to, like, are we going to referendum? Are we just going to, we're just sort of at very initial stages of that conversation. And so we just want to look at sort of what the long-term options are and say, okay, we're interested in these, go get us more information, if that makes sense. So we'll start talking just with the 2024 budget. So maybe the clicker works, maybe it doesn't. We'll see. It's close, too far away.
Look at how good that looks.
I
Pause
was
for a moment.
I was just thinking that. It really
Just
does.
take a breath, I guess. I don't know. Maybe we won't have a clicker tonight. So
We all have copies of the slides.
you do all have copies of the slides.
Yeah.
So,
That.
because every budget needs a little brevity. I don't know. This is the best I could come up with a budget meme.
that's a bad meme because he lost his head at the end of season 1.
Well, brace yourselves, I guess. All right. So we have some challenges. We have challenges related to increased material costs due to inflation. And so just to give you a few examples that the department heads kindly put together, Jared threw a few out. For instance, concrete delivered to a job site 3 years ago was $75 per cubic yard. It is now $175 per cubic yard. Interestingly, I heard across several departments that the cost of paint has gone up astronomically. So that's one that we're seeing a 50 to 100% increase in. Electronics, no matter what kind of electronics it is, those have gone up about 50%. Also, the lead times are very long. Steel has gone up 30%. Brass fittings, asphalt used to be 68 per ton 3 years ago. Now it's 100. That's we pick up if it's placed on a construction site. It used to be 80, now it's 120 per ton. Those are just a couple examples from Jared. Dan, playground mulch has gone up. Again, that paint used to be $36 per box. Now it's $67.50 per box to paint aerosol field paint. Our water chemistry contract has gone up significantly in the last 5 to 6 years. Even the price of printing our youth, like baseball, softball, rec shirts has gone up 32% over the last 3 years. And so we are just seeing kind of significant increases across, our purchasing. And so as a result of that, we are able to buy less this year than we have been in prior years. And we have had a 0 increase budget rule for, at least a decade. I don't know, at least a decade, going back probably further than that. Yep, Diane's saying too. And so with that, you know, what we could buy 2 years ago or 20 years ago, obviously is not what we can buy today. And so we are really, I think, feeling it as far as our budgets go and what we're able to buy and what we're able to do for the city without seeing an increase in department budgets. Our COLA is not keeping up with inflation. Recruiting and training employees is becoming more challenging. We have definitely seen a rise in employee turnover. Just since 2022, we have lost our planning associate, our GIS manager, our IT specialist. We have lost our events person at the Omni Center. We have had the most turnover since I've been with the city in the last probably 18 months. And so that, you know, costs us money just in the recruitment and as well as just lost work product and not having anybody in those positions. It's getting harder to fill those positions. We're getting less qualified candidates. You know, we do an exit interview with every individual when they leave. What we're hearing is they're leaving for higher wages, remote work, and more flexible environments, among other things. We anticipate that we are going to have higher health insurance premiums this year. I talk about this later in the slides, but the state used some state surplus funds related to insurance to keep our premiums low this year. We do not anticipate that they will continue to do that. And so we are conservatively budgeting for a 10% increase in hopes that it comes in less. Payout of the sick leave banks, we do have 28% of our full-time employees eligible for retirement. This is sort of an unknown and becomes very difficult to budget for. Generally speaking, we hope that we have, you know, if somebody retires, and obviously we have vacated wages. And so the idea is that you use those vacated wages. We're running into a little bit of a problem because if they have a full sick bank, which not everybody does, but if they do, and then they also have vacation to pay out, you know, we can be filling that position faster than we're going through those vacated wages, if that makes sense. So those are sort of a summary of the budget challenges for 2024. Budget assumptions. So state supplemental shared revenue was voted on by both the House and the Senate. We anticipate that the governor will sign that into law tomorrow. Today is a federal holiday, and so they were not in session. Also, my apologies for bringing you in here on Juneteenth, but thank you for coming. So our estimated supplemental aid is $458,979 on top of the normal $512,803. That is being tied to sales tax. So if the state accrues more in sales tax in any given year, then we will see an increase in how much we receive in supplemental shared revenue. Obviously, we don't necessarily know what that will mean for the future, but should result in some kind of increase year over year, assuming we don't go into a significant recession. Just again, I pointed out that the Group Insurance Board, which manages our state insurance funds for medical and healthcare insurance, did use surplus funds last year. So we are anticipating that will not happen again this year. We also were conservatively edgy on our interest income planning. And so we did budget for the highest amount that we've ever budgeted for interest income of $200,000. Sabrina is fairly confident in that number given our performance thus far in 2023 with our new investments that we have done through Dana Investments. So with those, I did ask Sabrina to run some preliminary numbers for us. And based on the preliminary numbers, which included that 10% premium, a 1.5% levy increase, which has sort of been on par over the last couple of years, included the union COLAs, which have already been negotiated, that $200,000 in interest income, step increases, but did not include any kind of COLA for non-unions or any budgeting for retirement payouts. The city's deficit would be $191,165 for next year without the supplemental shared revenue. With that increase of $458,979, that does bring us down not down, I guess, to a surplus of $267,814. So what I want to talk about tonight, and I just want to take a moment to pause and state and thank the legislature, because without this shared revenue increase, we would be having a much different conversation. I have numbers on how much we would save if we closed the pool. I mean, we have talked about what services we would have to cut. And so, so thank you to our House and Senate and the governor for making that happen. With that, we do have some areas that we could use those remaining surplus. And so that's really where I want to focus our conversation tonight. And so when I polled our department heads for kind of what their priorities were, it was pretty unanimous that the priority is a competitive COLA for our remaining employees. As I mentioned, turnover has a lot of problems, both from loss of work, stress on employees. We want to keep the employees we have, and in order to do that, we have to remain competitive. We did do a comp study in 2020, as most of you are aware. The unfortunate part is that the market changed immediately after we implemented that, and we do believe we likely have a fair amount of our positions that might be out of whack already. And so with that, our recommendation as department heads and myself would be that we should prioritize a competitive COLA in this year's budget. Other options for priorities are a new or expanded positions. So I have just listed some of the positions that we have prioritized here: building and grounds, park maintenance staff. Some of these are not new positions. Some of these are partial part-time positions that we would bring full. So for instance, like building and grounds, that could be a combined position with our custodial staff. We are losing our custodian in August, so we will have a vacancy there. And so that could be a combined position. Parks maintenance, if that were a full-time position we filled, we may be able to reduce some seasonal staff in order to fund part of that position. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of what positions we would be filling tonight. I just want to know if you're interested in establishing new positions, if that makes sense. So new or expanded positions would be one priority. We do have a small number of positions that have been categorized as seasonal that really should be categorized as regular part-time. Under FLSA, this is better for us. It will increase the wages and benefits because they would be eligible for part-time benefits. So that would be one potential priority. That would not be a high cost to the city, but I thought was worth mentioning. Going back to what I led with, we could increase department budgets to adjust for inflation. This is something that we have not done in a very long time. And again, if I were to sort of ask department heads, I know that this is something that they would like to see happen to the extent possible. Les gave a really good example. They have hired, 6 people, and since he's been here, they haven't increased their training budget in a decade. And so it becomes a lot harder to train people at the same level when we're not keeping up with that. And that's really any department. You could, pick any one of them, and we just have not kept up with that. Another option would be that we could designate an amount to the equipment replacement fund. And so what I like about this option is, one, we could use it to offset some smaller equipment costs this year, as well as there's a lot of unknowns with the ERP system costs. And so we would have some money set aside for that. But also by not spending all of our money this year and just designating some of it to equipment replacement, then, we would have that money available as we needed it in 2025 for wages or other general fund expenditures. So those are the priorities that I've kind of outlaid. I'm open to other priorities as well, but I'm going to kind of pause it here and open it up for discussion.
Okay, anybody like to say anything?
I have a quick question
Alder
for Amanda.
Stevens?
When you use the term competitive COLA, that could be 2%, that could be 10%.
I think
What do you define as competitive?
I think to be competitive, we would need to look at doing at least a 2-2 split. So a 2% in January and a 2% in July. This is what we gave the police officers last year. The cost of that would be around $86,000 to the city. I did also pull numbers on what it would be to do a 4% COLA right off the bat in January, and that would be about $114,000.
Okay, so let's just continue with questions first. If someone has just a question for clarification or more information. Diane?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to make sure that since this is more of a budget meeting, we're not going to be held to the 2 questions, or the round robin. I mean, where we can only ask 2 questions, and this is going to be more of an open meeting
I
type.
think the purpose of the meeting is to give Amanda the information that she needs to make a preliminary budget with the support of the rest of the staff.
Perfect.
So hopefully she'll tell us when she has achieved it.
Okay,
When she says enough is enough, then
if we've all spoken.
yeah, maybe.
I just want to make sure that we weren't going to be held to
No,
because there's
I mean,
a
if
lot of
we, if we
information.
start to get to 30 questions each, we might draw a line.
Well, that I'm not in support of that.
No.
Yeah, I just thought maybe we should start by asking questions and then talking about opinions after.
I'm
the
going to
questions.
keep formulating, so I'll back
Okay.
off right now, but thank you.
Stephen?
Yes, for the state supplemental, the 458,979 that we're expecting to be signed. That's one time for this year, right?
No, so that would be moving forward.
So we'll have
Or-
that much every single year or that much increasing?
We will have that much guaranteed every year, but then it's going to be tied to the sales tax. So if the state earns more sales tax next year,
We
And
can
it-
get more,
then we will get more.
but no less than the
It
450.
will not go down.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
in addition to the 512.
Yes.
So this is, okay, got it.
Okay, Larry?
Yeah, you mentioned part-time positions or seasonal positions. How many are we talking about?
I'm gonna field that to Amy.
You could probably bring that back with you if needed.
I wouldn't envision that being more than a handful. Again, we'd have to assess and take a look at that, but probably not more than a handful. Right off,
Handful being what, 6?
like maybe 5.
Okay, Diane?
Thank you. So as a follow-up to Larry's question, are we talking about the correcting position categories? Is that what you're referring to?
Mhm.
And piggybacking on that, didn't we already do that? I thought we did that within the last year or so.
We have done some, we have not done all. So there are a few positions, for instance, we have somebody that provides, custodial support at the library. Their hours may not be 100% the exact same every week, but they're working roughly the exact same numbers and they're working 52 hours a week. That's really a regular part-time job, not a seasonal job.
So and as a follow-up, when it says, which will increase wages / benefits, but reduce liability, what liability do we have?
Because it really should be a regular part-time job. We're kind of skirting FLSA
Okay,
by not having them be regular part-time employees.
okay, thank you.
Okay, Larry?
But the seasonal jobs wouldn't be the library. Are you talking about landscaping, things like that?
No, so we have, for instance, one example would be we have a person that provides part-time custodial help at the library 4 days a week, 5 days a week, every week, 52 weeks a year. I mean, that really is a regular part-time job. It's not seasonal. There isn't anything seasonal about that. So this wouldn't be like our pool staff or our park and rec. Like Amy said, there's just really like less than 5 positions that
Okay.
really are kind of miscategorized.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Leanne?
Yes, Amanda, because this mutual aid or excuse me, municipal aid has kind of strings attached to it as to what it can be used for, like law enforcement, fire protection, and so forth. How does that come into play on the final page here when we talk about the ERP systems and putting money aside and how are you going to keep track of?
So we have to spend that much money on streets and public safety every year. We are already doing that out of our general fund. And so we are meeting the requirements of the state.
So all of that money is already in public service, in the public works area?
Yeah, between those three categories, we spend the equivalent already. And so there are some rules related to like, we can't decrease our public safety forces. But other than that, it's essentially because we're spending that money already, this then becomes sort of a pass-through amount, if that makes sense.
It's an accounting thing.
Okay.
Okay, Diane?
Thank you. So it appears that there is a misnomer out there that what I've been continually hearing from a number of sources the last several months is that this will be new dollars that we will be able to put towards new spending for public works, but police and fire. But what I'm hearing now is if we've already satisfied that requirement, we can spend it on other things as long as we do not decrease.
That is what we
Those
have
are
been told.
Two different. And so I've been biting my tongue and holding my tongue all along saying, let's just wait to see how the legislature, how it all comes out, because who knows? Because there was so much, movement. But so that's okay. Thank you.
Yep, okay, let's go to Sabrina in case she can answer something.
Okay, thank you.
you.
So when we were at the Capitol, we did ask that very question to two of the representatives that we met with, and they both said essentially what Amanda is saying. We can't decrease our service, but essentially we reallocate dollars. We reallocate like those dollars are for, we put that into police or fire. And then other dollars that we're using there, we use elsewhere. So that is what the understanding is.
So it's an accounting thing.
I think that Leanne was first and then
That's fine.
Stephen. Okay,
I just,
Stephen?
I guess, and you tell me I'm totally off the wall. This, yeah, it's an accounting thing. It's kind of like with the ARPA funds we were getting. We're using the ARPA funds for these items and therefore all that extra money can go to other stuff. So yeah, we'd be dedicating this, but that frees up other money. That's all.
That is correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now Leanne.
Also, I had heard that there were 3 different proposals for this money that were going, and I don't know if we know which one landed on the governor's, because that might make a difference on what we end up with.
Yes, yep, the number in here will not change.
Okay.
There were some municipalities, like La Crosse will ultimately end up getting more based on the final version, but we were already receiving over 20% of an increase, actually almost 90% of an increase. And so our number will not change.
Okay, any other questions? Diane?
Thank you. Do we know why? Because I saw the interview in the article about at the time, within the last week or so, City of La Crosse was looking at maybe about a 20%, and we were like almost 90. Do we understand why some got more or were projected to get more than others, and why there was such a disparity?
That I do not know. And we were quite frankly told not to ask.
Okay. I thought I'd ask here in friendly territory, but if I may ask Sabrina, regarding the budget assumptions for 24, you're looking at projecting $200,000 in interest income for 2024. I don't have that in front of me. What did we, I know the number was low for 2023, wasn't it? Like really
Yeah,
low.
55,000, and we've already met that.
Okay.
We're almost at 200,000 through May of this year. So I am very confident that we will reach 200,000 in 2024.
Short of a market crash.
Okay.
Yes, short of a
Yeah, we
market
never
crash.
know what's-
Our funds are in very safe securities, so I'm not very concerned about that.
Okay, thank you. And so while I still have, maybe
Sure,
I'll just
go ahead, no
just hit all
problem.
mine and just get them done, or the majority of them. So regarding the considerations about the department head's priority comp studies, like out of date for many positions. I know we just did that in 2020. We rolled that out. My concern was we spent $35,000 for that. And the premise was that we were all assured over and over and over again that it's going to, you set it, forget it. It was going to be in place. And then I heard rumblings that, well, as soon as we did one reorg, it's like it just all went to heck and we blew it up. And it's like, that was not the purpose of why we did the comp study. And as someone who has been on this council for a number of years and who believe that we should be paying people what they are worth and give them the proper benefits and such, I'm very disheartened to hear that it's out of sink. So.
I
it's
think it's twofold. I mean, I do think there were some reorgs immediately following that did not necessarily help, but also the market twist. I mean, the market changed dramatically in 2020. And with the employee shortage, people have increased wages dramatically over the last 3 years. I mean, there are municipalities that have implemented wage increases mid-year because how much the market has changed and because they're losing staff at a level that they can't sustain essentially. And so I don't know that at this point, 3 years out, 4 years out, that it's necessarily entirely the reorganizations. I think it's also the market.
Okay, thank you. And then going back to Sabrina, about the potential ERP system cost, is that the Enterprise Resource Planning System, the software program?
Yes, that's correct. That dollar figure is just an estimate. We did reach out to Tyler Technologies, which is our current provider. And they said if we went to their cloud-based server, which I presume will go that way, but Joe's going to help me with that. We're working on the RFP for the ERP system right now. Likely it won't go into place until 2025. So we will need additional dollars if we do go to that cloud-based server. So I was just kind of putting that out there that it likely won't be a cost in 2024, likely a cost in 2025. It will be shared with the enterprise funds. So like the full 50,000 won't hit the general fund, but a portion will.
And those are user fees. So under a cloud-based system, we will pay essentially a license fee for all of the users to the system. And most of these systems now are cloud-based. And so we anticipate that regardless of whether we go to Tyler or not.
Okay. And then, do I remember correctly that we set some money aside already in capital improvements for 2023 as a set aside to build upon, right?
Correct.
That was like,
That's for like the implementation. So there's, the cost of the system and the implementation. These would be the ongoing yearly fees.
okay. I think that's all I have right now. Thank you, Your Honor.
If I could
Alder
hold up
Stevens?
then.
Yep.
Just for clarity, it's looking like if we invest another $50,000 into the ERP system, we would expect a $20,000 savings. Is that $20,000 like annual going forward?
Yes,
So it's like a
With-
40% rate of return.
in a sense, we would have savings, but like the total cost is going to increase, but we would have a decrease in server cost for the city.
So years 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, $20,000 less, but more expense now to put that into place.
Well, no, because it's going to increase by 50,000, but then we'll have a server savings of 20. So then it's really increasing by 30,000 per year, right?
Okay, so
Does that make sense?
yeah, that's not how I read that the first.
Okay.
So, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Could Alder Stevens remark about what are you referring to? Because I am lost.
On the spreadsheet.
Yeah, where
On the spreadsheet.
it is on the spreadsheet?
Under section finance,
Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
have a blown up copy.
Oh, okay.
There's an estimated cost for the increased budget due to the ERP system of $50,000.
Oh,
So I was reading that as we've already put some money into it. We need to do an additional 50,000, but then we would save $20,000 a year in storage costs. But now what I'm hearing is by going to the system, we're still increasing by 30,000 a year.
Correct, because the operating costs of having the system would increase by, again, that first year likely 50,000. After that, likely 30,000 because we're going to have some storage savings. But likely we would still see that increase. And again, that's an estimate because we have no idea what system we're going to go with. We may pick a system that wouldn't be that high, but it was just kind of I know this cost is going to be out there, so I felt it was fair to share that information.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into the weeds in that because to Sabrina's point is really just an estimation at this point.
And just to clarify, that server would last multiple years. That would not be a savings every year.
Thanks, Jared.
thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it.
Okay, now I'll open it for anything anyone wants to talk about. Stephen?
Do we want to be going into goals and what have you before we get into the long-term challenges and what have you that are still in the slide pack or?
I would like to, so we've asked a lot of questions. Now I'd like to hear feedback as far as what each of your
Okay.
priorities are for the short term for 2024.
We'll start at Stephen and we'll go this way. And then the next thing we do, we'll start at Larry and we'll come this way.
Yeah, so as we go into the budgetary process here over the next many months, I think our primary goal needs to be positioning the city for long-term financial success. We should be looking out into the out years as well. We had the last 2 years where we were hitting the accelerator largely because of a significant amount of ARPA funds that came in. I think we need to be tapping the brakes. That's just me personally. My main focus that I would be focusing on would be on kind of catching up where we have been falling behind. And those to me are 3 primary categories that I can think of right off the bat. One is on the COLA side. Another one is catching up on roads because we have not been keeping up with our formula for that as far as how much we've been funding it. And the third one is on the parks, and we have definitely been falling behind on repair and replacement of parks. So those are my big 3 that I'd be looking at. But in the meantime, I'm also looking at tapping the brakes overall. And I would throw out there now just for consideration, it's not something we need to worry about until the budget comes down, is I really think we need to have a staffing moratorium. We have been increasing staff both in several positions in pay grade and in the number of people that we have on board for the last couple of years. Those are long-term costs that continue to increase in cost over time as well. And until we can get a hold of what the future looks like, I personally think we need to be having a staffing moratorium. I certainly would be open to these 3, 4, 5 misalignment of seasonal versus part-time or not. That would fall outside of what my main concerns are here, but that's me.
If I may ask, what's the topic again, what we're addressing, which one?
So basically, we're going around and you can give me what you personally would have for your budget priorities for 2024.
Budget priorities.
Yep.
Short term or long term?
Short term, so
Short term.
just for 2024.
And it would be the operating budget.
Yes. So we're not going to get into capital improvement
well, then
budget.
roads
Yeah,
and
so
that
that-
would be a
Yeah,
different.
so only the COLA out of my comments would actually.
When you said that, I was like, well, that gets you down to,
Yeah.
Yeah, so only. the
I'm
COLA
going to
there.
pass and I'm going to keep formulating, but
Okay.
please come back to me. Thank you.
I don't know that that's really fair for everyone.
Oh, well.
For you to hear everyone else's and then decide what yours are. I feel like
No.
we're gonna go this way and then next time we'll
No,
go
that's
the
fine.
other way and then
Fine.
you'll have a lot of time for the next question.
So we just, when we get done, we just had to make sure to
You'll be able to speak
what, yeah,
again.
I'm short term. As someone who continues to advocate for parks, then now before us, we're talking about the possibility of expanding a current park. Every year or every other year, I have the same conversation with Parks Director Dan Wick about, sometime eventually we have to say no. Unless we're willing to throw more bodies at something, we cannot continue to burn our people out. We've been so very fortunate to have people who keep rising to the top and keep doing the work, but somewhere along the line, we have to say no. And I'm not saying no to the expansion. I'm just saying, what are we going to do? How are we going to handle that expansion? Obviously, it could be, if it's a potential expansion that's before us, it could be handled in a number of different ways. It could be less intensive or more labor intensive, depending upon whatever is decided in the end. But I have a grave concern that we're going to throw more onto parks back again. I think I could not agree more with Alder not regarding roads. If you don't have a good foundation, you don't have anything, and we don't want to become like some of our abutting municipalities. You hear West Salem, they're crying in their beer right now about how bad their roads are. But quite frankly, they used to brag within the last 10 decades about how they never had to borrow for anything. And they were proud that they never had to borrow for anything, but the roads continue to deteriorate. But City of Onalaska has continued to put a very high standard on our infrastructure and our roads. And that is in my top three. I don't know what my top three is, but that's one of the very top. But also concerned for parks. And I think my biggest thing is that, we don't burn people out. We have to be very cognizant of that. So that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
For me being the first time going through this process, what I've read so far, I would kind of put a tick mark next to the one that Stephen had, the COLAs. I think that's a real big deal to keep established that that's something that we should be paying attention to. So I'd go there.
Thank you. And for me, I think my first choice also would be a focus on the COLAs. I think we're seeing unprecedented turnover. We're really looking at fewer well-qualified candidates as we're having more positions that need to be filled. And we're not coming off of that yet. So I think we need to make sure we're keeping the valuable people that we have. Yeah.
I would go first with COLAs, then with roads, and then I would go with the Omni. I would like to see us invest in the Omni and their staff and not see them working extreme amounts of time with, or getting people in there to do it on a volunteer basis. But do you know if they're going to show up and things like that? So I would like to see us pay more attention to the Omni.
Okay, Dan Stevens.
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess I've got a small list here. I think the first thing that we should probably consider is tying up some loose ends where we have over the previous year or years. One example would be we thought it was kind of a emergency need to try to get an increase in hours for a records retention person in the police department, knowing full well that we may not have enough money in the next budget cycle. So now that initially my thought was very similar to Stevens, I was thinking that the state supplement was initially going to be a one-time shot, in which case I think that we don't know what next year is going to look like. We've been expanding and we've added resources to public safety and some other changes to here within City Hall. And I was going to say initially we're going to have to take a pause, but if we have continually, we'll have some other resources. I think we need to set permanent some things right. And the second to that end, everybody who's been on council in the past, I think we made at least a verbal commitment to the Parks Department that had really kind of taken the brunt of previous layoffs. And everybody thought that, this is the next time we add a position, that's where it would go to. So this might be the year that I think maybe we should make good on that. And if we do add a position, the first and potentially only position I would add would be in Parks labor. Since parks have come up, I think it's a quality of life issue that sometimes we get attached to what we have. And I think we need to kind of plan for what we want to be. So we know that our park staff have been stretched thin. And in the past, myself and at least one other alder have driven around at parks on various times. And there's some that you consistently don't see people there. And then you see other parks that are very frequently used. And I think that we should aim our resources in parks towards the parks that people use. And if that means, maybe selling off for development or something, a park that gets visited, 2 or 3 times a month by one person, maybe it's time to let that go and realign. The Omni Center was brought up, and the one thing in the budget I think we should look at is have a very this is maybe kind of more of a long-term thing, but we have a fund that if the Omni falls short, that we draw off that fund and it takes it so that is not, any shortfall is not passed on to the Onalaska taxpayer, which is what has happened in the past and in La Crosse in the last years when things went south, that they had a problem. And I think we should learn from that and really avoid that. So if we can have that fund, that will protect us and allow us to have the Omni Center for a much longer period of time. I think that it's great that the interest income has been going up. I remember when I first came to council, I mean, we had a good number and you could budget off that and it was relatively consistent. And then interest rates just really went down to the gutter, and that forced us into a position where we had to look at some layoffs. So I think we want to be careful and maybe use that as interest income as a slush fund. If we get it, great. But if it disappears, then we're not going to back ourselves into a corner. So with that said, I would be careful adding more staff, but maybe shore up some of the positions that we've kind of have these loose ends hanging out there. I'm good with doing a COLA.
Okay, can I ask just one clarifying question? So for instance, like the police records position, so Sabrina, correct me if I'm wrong, but we do have in that budget calculation, the hours the same as they were budgeted for this year. So
It went to 27 hours,
I think, was it 27, 23?
23.
Okay,
So my thought is that was left open-ended. I think when we last discussed that at council, I think that should be not open-ended. So there's a little bit more, from the employee's point of view that, oh my gosh, what's going to happen at budget time? And I'm going to have to lose we need that position filled for some statutory reasons.
yes, yeah, no, I just wasn't sure if you were, if you were saying that we would increase it further or if we would just leave it as is. So we have at least budgeted it already for it to be left as is. I mean,
Yeah, I would at the very least keep it at the level it's at. However, it could be discussed, and if I'm sure the chief could make a case as to why it should be higher. But any debate in the future, I would like to hear the case, but we need to maintain that minimum. And that would end my spiel.
Okay, Larry.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I've heard from everybody here and everybody's in agreement on one area, and that's the COLA issue. We need to keep the fine staff that we do have. And the cost of living is, just go to the grocery store and you're gonna be able to pick that up. I'm highly in support of the Omni Center too, but I'd like to do one more step. I'd like to have us get a designer to come and give us some projections as far as expanding the Omni Center. The winter months in the Omni Center are basically solidly booked with skaters. You can't have any events there. If we could get something to expand that Omni Center out so that in the winter time we could get more money coming in all year round, I think it'd be well worth it. The Omni Center right now, as far as I know, is in the black. Correct? Yeah. And it's a lot because of the teamwork that we have working there, the staff that's working there. The events coordinator position has helped out a lot, and my third one is roads. I mean, everybody here knows what living in Wisconsin means. It means potholes. But I think we are far above anything in La Crosse, especially if you go down 3rd and 4th Street, where I'm at every day. That's my 3.
Okay.
Mayor, if I could,
Thanks.
I missed one item on my own notes here. So in addition with the COLA and possibly a staffing moratorium off the general fund here, we also have an opportunity to increase the amount of money we would normally put into the equipment replacement fund. And we did raid that a lot this last year. So I think that's something else we should be looking at.
Okay, thank you. Diane, did you want to go again?
Oh, and as a follow-up to Stephen, so I think we, Sabrina, didn't we put like over $400,000 in that at the end of this last year?
We did, but we typically spend around 1 million out of there, right? So, prior to me coming to the city of Onalaska, the prior finance director would try to put something from the tax levy into the equipment replacement fund. Because it's a governmental fund, so we can do that. For budget year 2022 and 2023, I didn't budget any levy into that fund. So I'm in full support of budgeting some dollar amount, if our administrator will let me, into that fund, for 2024. But you are correct. Typically what we do at the end of the year, any surplus that we have, we do try to add to the equipment replacement by doing an operating transfer. And that's something that you all approve every year.
And while we wouldn't be able to say what that number is now, we are anticipating likely being able to do that at the end of this year as well.
I have a follow-up question.
Okay, we're doing follow-up questions. So we're at Diane right now until she's done, then we'll go to Sean.
Sorry, I have just two little things. So regarding positions, especially with a statutorial situation and such with the records clerk, I think we need to really take a hard look at that because it was in the past. I don't know if it's still going on where sometimes Rebecca was,
Yes.
and I'm guessing she's still putting
Yep.
some time. And I mean, if she has the time, that maybe that's fine, but just long term, it would be right. I think we need to right size that. I read with great interest the article that was in the paper recently about, and I know we're not talking to capital improvements, but I will want to talk to you sometime about capital improvements and why we have 100% body cam wearing, but only 86% dash cams in the vehicles. That at least that's what was quoted. But anyway, one thing that I think, and some people may not think it's a big deal, but someone who was on the Technology Advisory Committee for 18 years, IT is near and dear to my heart. And I personally believe that a IT help desk person is way overdue. That is a position that would touch literally every single person at City Hall, every crevice, every corner. And I think that would be, we've needed one for quite a long time. So great to have Joe on board now, but I'm going to continue to, I mean, everyone needs help, but but that's something that's near and dear to my heart that I will continue to talk about. Thank you.
Amanda?
I was just going to echo that is an important position. I think that our thought was Joe is very new. And so we want to give him sort of a year to assess things.
Yeah.
And so it may not be a 2024 ask, but likely a 2025 and beyond ask.
Diane, are you done for now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Sean? Okay, I'm good. Leah?
And this is just kind of a technical question. When it comes to the spreadsheet and how it's set up, my question is it set up by priority? Is the first thing on your list for a department the thing that you want the most? Is the second thing the second? And it would help me going through it if that would be done whenever it came back to us, because then we know what you think as department heads are the most important things for us to look at. So that was just my question.
So
So-
let's have Amanda explain the spreadsheet a little more then.
Yeah, so this is very much an internal working document. I honestly hadn't even intended to give it to you, and then I thought it might be helpful, and so I included it. It should be in order by department's preference. So it's not in order of priority in the sense that clerk is not, I mean, no offense, Joanne, but that's not the number one priority because that's at the top. But if you go by each department, they should have their positions in order of
Yeah,
priority.
that's what I meant.
Correct.
In the department, is it in order of priority?
It should be, yes.
Okay.
And this was sort of, an immediate needs and then sort of a long-term needs, if that makes sense. So some of these are very much immediate needs. And then some of these are more just, long-term. It would be really beneficial to have this position.
Okay, Leanne, are you done? Dan?
I just wanted to clarify, right now we're talking about the operating budget, is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
So we're talking about roads, is anybody proposing taking money out of the operating budget and So that really wouldn't be a priority.
No, I started us down that path, but at the same time, the examples that were given to us on the inflation were all on the capital improvement side, almost with exception of maybe health insurance and things like that. So, I myself got a little misled, and since I went first, I think I took us down that path.
But that's okay. We know, we all agree on that.
All right, I thought we were getting a little off track and wanted to make sure we're talking about the budget.
So do you-
Yeah, so for instance, like we can look at expansion of the Omni Center when it comes to capital improvement or, things related to roads. We might talk a little bit about that when we get to long-term because there are some options related to roads for long-term. But this is really just, general fund operating budget priorities.
Okay, Sabrina.
And I would just add to that, in regards to like the position that has been mentioned for the Omni, that wouldn't come out of the general fund budget likely either. So just keep that in mind as well.
Thank you.
But I would still take that feedback because we can look at that as far as, room tax dollars and the Omni Center's budget.
Yeah, good, all good thoughts. Dan, do you have anything else right now?
Said my bit the first time around and I had thoughts on capital improvement stuff too, but I didn't think that was part of the current discussion. So
Right.
we'll get to that later.
Okay, Larry?
I'm not sure what area it falls into.
Well, we'll let you know.
That's okay. The other thing I forgot to talk about first time around was the police department, the training program. Which area would that go into? The computerized one. I just want to pull a plug for that one, but I'm
Okay.
not sure if it's capital gains or.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sure. Depends on how much it costs and
Yeah.
how we're paying for it, if it qualifies. So you're saying that's a priority for you?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I had it on the police.
Okay. Sabrina, did you have anything you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to say?
I don't believe so. I mentioned that the equipment replacement fund is definitely somewhere that I would like to see some dollars go. And then I'll just take Amanda's direction in regards to comprising everything that has been mentioned as we move forward.
Okay.
I would also just like to note that Amanda has changed the process for 2024 in a good way. Departments are also going to submit their budget priorities via memo to Amanda and myself. And likely those will be shared with you as well. So that is just a nice thing as we move forward.
And you will see any requests for staffing via those. So if somebody does want a new position, that has to be one of their initiatives. They have to explain what the need is for that position, how they would use that position, and what the cost would be for that position.
Is there any staff person that would like to address the common council?
Well, we don't bite.
Just since we're talking about streets and it's actually in regard to the general fund, years ago, we used to pay for the chip seal and the crack filling of our streets out of the operating budget, but we haven't done that for over 20 years now because we just couldn't afford it in the operating budget, just with the levy limit and all the calculations, we couldn't afford it. So that is something that used to be out of, it's an operating thing that extends the life of the street. So we're able to use the capital improvement money, but it is something that is a yearly expense every year, and we need to have it every year in order to keep up on our streets. So I just wanted to say that. And I also would agree with the equipment replacement fund. There's a lot of things that go in the capital improvement budget in that 25 to 50,000, so like pickup trucks and things like that, that really should be going to our equipment replacement fund. That I think we just get strapped and we just look for, staff is looking for options. We're trying to find an end to the means and we're just trying to do the best we can with what we're given. So.
Thank you for that, Jared. Amanda?
And just to build a little bit off of what Jared said, and this is a conversation for another day, but our capital improvement budget threshold is $5,000. You cannot buy hardly anything for $5,000. And so at some point, I think a discussion related to what, the bottom number for capital improvement inclusion, especially if something's not bondable, really should be, because those projects should really be included in a budget related to the equipment replacement fund.
Thank you. So Amanda, do you feel like you have enough direction, or is there a specific thing you'd like the council to comment on now?
No, I think this is good. If everybody's comfortable, we can go on to long-term issues unless any of the other staff want to weigh in on their costs or anything this year. Anybody? All right, who thinks that retention is an issue? Okay. Who thinks their general department budget is not high enough? I'm putting them on the spot. All right, who thinks that we need a competitive COLA to keep our staff? Note that human resources hand went up before I think I finished my sentence. I mean, they could all give you individual examples. Please feel free to speak with them related to their individual department budgets. But like I said, you know, we have some budget problems. And so that's what we're going to talk about now.
Okay, so let's just pause a second. Does anyone want to say anything else, counselors, before we move to the next topic? Okay, just making sure everyone got their chances. Yep.
Will we have a miscellaneous at the end?
Sure. Yes, we can have a miscellaneous at the end. I just am trying to be as time efficient with the meeting as possible.
Thank you.
Okay, back to Amanda.
All right, so long-term budget challenges. Our city, as beautiful as it is not growing. Therefore, our net new construction is marginal, which, to put it in the most basic terms, is no increase in levy means no increase in money. And so despite that, obviously, we still have growing needs. As we've mentioned, we have a lot of beautiful parks. Those parks take time and effort to maintain. We have a lovely pool that is a great community service, but does not necessarily make us profit. We also have increased needs for street. You know, if we're going to maintain our streets better, we need our staff to be able to do that and do that efficiently. We are seeing increased areas of liability. Our insurance rates across the board, whether it's for health insurance or our actual city insurance, are increasing. We have more exposure as far as it relates to IT. We're seeing a lot more liability with respect to viruses, cities being hacked. We're also seeing our insurance carriers not want to provide as much insurance when it comes to that, which means we have to be more diligent in our selection of vendors and our training of our staff. We have ongoing equipment needs, and our citizens have a expressed desire to have more virtual interactions with the city, which means they want to be able to get their licenses online. They want to be able to pay their fees online. They do not want to have to come into City Hall unless they have to. And so we need to work on, through our new website and ERP system, becoming more virtually friendly. All of that obviously does cost money. So with that, there are not a ton of great solutions, I'll be honest. Some of them include, we could do an operating referendum. So we could go to the public and we could ask to increase our levy for operational purposes. We would have to be clear about what types of operational purposes that would be. So if we're going to, you know, use it for, and it can be a mixture. So going into, now we're going to talk a little bit about capital and general. It could be a combination of capital as well as general. So we're going to, you know, look at increasing how many streets we do and funding street pavement, but also, you know, the staffing for streets. We could look at doing a referendum to increase fire service and build a new fire station. We could kind of combine capital and operating in a referendum. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was, I think, a record high of referendums across cities and villages over the last year, with at least the majority of them being successful. So we have, Joanne, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 chances to go to referendum in 2024. We have a spring and a fall election. So if we wanted to go out for any kind of referendum, we probably need to start having that conversation sooner than later, especially if we are looking at a spring referendum. The risk of any referendum is you're leaving it up to the voters. And so if they don't pass your referendum, then you have the negative impact of that. Pewaukee instituted a new transportation utility to fund the increased cost of street maintenance. So Jared has just done some very preliminary looking into that. It was actually challenged in circuit court. Pewaukee was successful. It was held that they could do that. I know Appleton also has looked into it and was working with Ehlers. If this is something that the council was interested in, we would simply move forward exploring what that would look like. But that would be one opportunity to fund our street maintenance moving forward. New fees, communities across the state, especially ones like us that are not growing, have gotten quite creative in imposing new fees ranging from streetlight fees. So that $225,000 is about how much we as a city pay to upkeep our streetlights in a year. So we could figure out a calculation to, as fairly as possible, distribute the cost of streetlights across the properties throughout the city and look at recouping that money. Other municipalities have instituted plowing fees to address the cost of snow plowing. So as you can see there, we spend about $400,000 annually a year in snow plowing. And so that would be a fee that we could, again, as fairly as possible, implement across the city. One of the largest fees, and that's actually capped. So there are certain fees that you cannot increase. You cannot basically charge anything except the amount that you've increased your general levy dollars from 2013 to the present. And so since 2013, we have increased how much we spend in fire by $740,546. That does not include the town of Onalaska money. So we kept that out because we didn't think it would be fair to include that in a fire service fee. So if you take that aside, we have increased how much we spend in the fire department since 2013 by almost $750,000. That is something that we could charge as a fire service fee to all residential and commercial property owners across the city. And so we would then recoup that money, which would be available to assist with providing fire service, which is much like the shared revenue amount would then free up dollars to spend the same amount elsewhere. So that would be another example of a fee. Annexation. We have not sought actively annexation. We do not have a lot of areas left for annexation, but there are a few small areas that we could set up for future annexation. One would be behind Wellington Greens. It would require some capital infrastructure, but sometimes you have to spend money to make money. And so that would be one option where we could make that area more desirable for the farms that remain back there to eventually annex in and allow for the expansion. We had briefly looked at it and thought anywhere from like 150 to 200 single family homes. Obviously the preference is for more density these days. And so ultimately it could also result in more than that. We could incentivize redevelopment. We do not do a lot as far as development goes to sort of offer any kind of financial incentive. Other communities will offer a developer an actual financial incentive for them to redevelop housing in their city. So that would be one option as far as incentivizing redevelopment. We also could, without spending any money, look at eliminating single family housing districts. That's something that the city of Minneapolis did recently, was they got rid of all of their R1. And so any area can be multifamily. So we could look at changing our zoning code to increase density across various districts or eliminate single family housing districts. There's a lot of options there, but that could allow for redevelopment of greater density in our city. We could also look at, and this would have a budgetary impact, but again, sometimes, like I said, you do have to spend a little money to make money, is we could reduce our fees associated with new development and redevelopment in an effort to encourage developers to develop here. And then lastly, we do have a fairly generous sick leave policy where we offer 24 weeks of sick leave payout for retirees. Because I don't want half of my department heads to walk out of the room. I'm not necessarily saying that's a benefit we need to take away from people, but I don't know that it's also a long-term sustainable benefit. And so I think that that is something that we should evaluate, whether that's in the form of a committee or how we do that. But there are some options where we could grandfather in employees, and it could be something where we do it moving forward, or we could give people the option, depending on what the alternative is, where they can either stay in one avenue. I know West Allis successfully implemented a a new sick and vacation benefit policy and basically gave their employees the choice to either stay under the old or move to the new. And it really depended on where you were in your career, whether they chose to do that or not. But that is an option that we could explore.
Okay, thank you for that, Amanda. I meant to ask, is there anybody attending online?
Patrick Barlow was. I don't know if he still is or not. And then two individuals who I am not sure. We have an iPhone and a Bob.
Okay, thank you. I'd asked from the context of thinking about department heads earlier when I asked if anyone wanted to give input. I wanted to make sure we didn't leave anyone out. Okay, this time let's start with Larry and we'll go this way. We'll go once around with whatever questions you have. We'll start with Larry and go this way,
Okay.
opposite directions.
So just to confirm, you're looking for input for
Really just what avenues would you like us to explore? Are there any
long
that
term.
for long term? Yep.
Or if you have questions.
And questions. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we'll start with Larry and then we'll go this way and then we'll go back to, and we'll just keep going around till everyone's done. And that should be fairly fair, I think.
This weekend I spent down in Prairie du Chien at Rendezvous. And talking to the people down there, the biggest problem that they're facing is there may not be any in the near future because every town that they go to, they're increasing fees so much that just makes it impossible for these things like a rendezvous or whatever you want to call it, carnival or any type of event to be non-sustainable. A couple of vendors I talked to stated that they had to have over $1 million insurance policy and he's selling $20 items. You know, it's, I know fees are needed and it's a double-edged sword. And I think the council ought to really look close at too high raising fees are gonna eliminate some of the beautiful things that we have in this city that we have going for us. The referendums that you talked about, yeah, I can support just about all that you had talked about. So there wasn't a whole lot that all where Amanda's put into it. Is ways of cutting down things and ways of making the city last a little longer. And I thank you for all your hard work, Amanda.
Okay, Dan?
I'm gonna start with the stuff that I don't like. First, the new transportation utility, is that a wheel tax?
No.
Could you describe that?
So it's based upon trip generation. So we would hire a consultant to do it the first time to get it set up and then we would maintain it like we do the stormwater utility, but it is based on trip generation. So if you have a single family home, typically the ITE manual, Institute of Traffic Engineers, said on average you make 9 trips a day coming and going from your single family home. If you have a commercial business based upon either square footage or parking stalls or some number, we would generate a number that each property in the city would generate and then run them into a formula. And then based on that formula, it'd be so much per trip.
So I guess to continue, at first I was thinking that was a wheel tax, but the streetlight fees, plowing fees, fire service fees, I'm generally speaking not supportive of those. If we have a revenue problem, we need money to pay our bills. It should just be on the general tax levy. So I would, out of all these options, the operating referendum is the way that I would go, and anything else I would generally not support. Annexation, sure, I'm willing to look at that. When we're talking about incentivized redevelopment, are we talking about creating a new TIF district, or is that something different?
I mean, it could be, or it could simply be that we allocate a certain amount of money for a financial incentive for a developer. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it. The other thing that we could do, sorry. The other thing that we could do that we haven't done is we could lower the cost of existing properties to annex in. And so right now you have a connection fee. If you want to annex in certain areas, we have well, it's long past the time that that infrastructure has been in place. And so we could waive those connection fees, which could incentivize annexation of existing properties. So that would be another option as well.
So I guess if we were talking about redevelopment, I might be open to something like that. If we're talking about new development, I mean, it was said that we don't have a lot of space that we can develop to, so I don't know that we need to give away the store when there's the supply that we have available is very, very limited. I think it's interesting looking at how we approach density. I don't know that if we were to try to increase density or change it so there are no R1s, I mean, we're not going to go plow anybody's house down, but it's going to give the potential future owner more options. And that I'm generally favorable towards. The reduced fees associated with new redevelopment, again, I think that we live in a good city that is comparatively attractive to some of the other surrounding municipalities. I know Patrick's listening, so Holman's nice too. But I don't think we need to give away the store. I think we just need to tax the appropriate amount on the general fund, and then everybody, based off of their property value would pay their fair share. I think it's more straightforward. I think it's upfront. Sometimes I kind of feel with some of these other fees that we assess is kind of a way to get it's addressing the same problem, but it's just kind of getting around the main issue is we don't have enough money. And this is where we're going to concentrate it on, and it should just be, a tax is a tax. So, and the last item on, I guess I'd hear the arguments. I'm not for or against changing the disability or the sick bank. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Leanne?
I would probably be in favor of the operating referendum. I'm not as crazy about the fees if we don't have to do it. The one thing that I have a lot of questions on, and I'd like to get as much information on, is how under incentivized redevelopment eliminate single family housing districts and or increase density in other districts. I'm just wondering how that would work, and would that affect the school district? And
It could, in a way that they would be happy about. They are seeing a decline in students. And so if it increased the number of, if it increased housing in our community, it could benefit them. So for instance, if you have a large lot right now, a single family lot, you can't do anything except have a single family house, right? But if we moved all single family R1 to R2, which allowed for greater density, then that person could either add an addition with, a second residence. So they could have basically a duplex. They could do an addition to create a duplex on their property. Depending, as we see, we do have some older housing stock, as people may want to tear that down, they could rebuild in a higher density. Density doesn't always, but typically will reduce the property value as well. And so having, multifamily increases the property value and the property taxes.
the other question I have is, when you have like side-by-side duplexes, my understanding is that the city of Onalaska now requires the owner to live in one half of that. I don't know.
No. No.
And what I worry about is by increasing, this, are we going to hold landlords to taking care of their property when they don't live there? So that's my concern about eliminating single family housing districts.
I mean, you would have that problem regardless of whether it's a single family or not. I mean, we have many single family rentals throughout the city, in addition to duplex rentals throughout the city, we don't necessarily have control. Anybody can buy a property and choose whether they want to live there, whether they want to rent it out. We're also seeing an increase in Airbnbs and Verbos across the city as well. So,
That one, I'm wavering. I'm not really for that yet. As far as the sick leave policy, as a last ditch effort, I'd rather not, if we don't have to, but we also have to be able to run the city most effectively, so. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm open to a operating referendum if we have exhausted other sources that we all agree on. Like a lot of others, I'm not sure I really understand the new transportation utility. I'm thinking of it as being kind of like our enterprise funds, but where that money is held separately and then used only for assorted things. So like I said, I need more information on that before I could have a strong opinion. The fees, like many others said, it is a possibility, but you need to realize too that, like, it's not just like getting $740,000, like that cost is then spread across our citizens and they're still paying for it anyways. So it might as well have at that point been upfront to them that it was their tax money. The annexation, I think, we've had a policy of, passiveness when it comes to annexation. But if the infrastructure were to support it, I could maybe see reducing the fees required, evaluating that. Doesn't seem like that would be too crazy of an idea. Some of these redevelopment ideas I'm cautious about because I feel like in established neighborhoods, especially if they're primarily single family residences, if suddenly, people are aware of how the houses around them are zoned, and if suddenly duplexes and multifamily starts going up, Katie maybe wants to correct me right away. I thought you wanted to say something. Okay, you want to go right now? Well, okay. So I'm just a little worried about that because I feel like we just went through the rezoning citywide to kind of redefine things and change things, and it really created a lot of turmoil, which has now settled down. So I'm not anxious to start that again without a lot of consideration. It's like all it's like all property disputes, they have two sides, right? So you allow someone to have a increased density on their property that affects all the neighbors around that property. So it could end up ruining some of the things that we really value in this community. We value our parks and we value some of our established neighborhoods with the nice big lots that many of us enjoy living in. Reducing some of the fees associated, that could be a good catalyst for that change. And then the long-term, the sick leave policy, I think that is something pretty seriously to consider. I think by providing long-term disability, we could ensure our employees have the support that they need when trouble strikes, and that they will be able to have a sustained income through their needs, and then remove the burden that it's putting on the city of having to pay these things out. It's just, if I know most people don't know the details of the budget, but it's been pretty significant many years, and especially with the aging population now, it's only expected probably to be worse with what is the number, like 30% of our workforce is within the age of possible retirement.
28%.
Yeah, so it's pretty significant. So that's what I have. Katie, did you want to say something now or you want to wait? You can wait. Okay. Sean?
One thing that rose to the top for me, I think over all of this was, and it seems to be across the board with everybody, IT infrastructure. I think that's a huge, big priority. I think that's going to affect each of the team leaders here. So that's something I'm big time for. Thank you.
Okay, Diane?
Thank you, Your Honor. Oh, there's a list here. So long-term budget solutions. I would strongly consider operating referendum. I know that some of these fees I had brought up last year, and then we ended up going with the recycling fee. And I don't know if anyone else has heard, but I have not had a single person contact me about it, and usually I get deluged with topics, but maybe I'll hear something when I knock on doors next spring, but I have not heard a single person talk about it. I think staff again for handling it as well as they did with the notice that went out, because I thought it was just handled very, very well and very professionally. So I do have a concern with additional fees. I think, we should just outright should be on our tax levy. So that's why I would support the operating referendum. I think at the beginning of this section, Amanda, you talked about maybe the pool a little bit. I would, and I think it was also in the documentation a little bit, I would be, the pool has provided a service to this community, and I realize that we operate at a deficit, and it would probably be one of the last things that I would ever consider to close. I just think it just provides such a huge service to our community. Now, if we were to get numbers and, we get some hard numbers and we learn more about and more in depth about the pros and cons and whatever, I'm open, everything's on the table for me, but I would like to think that we should be able to still maintain that service. As someone who has been knocking on, I've had 8 elections, and when I knock on several hundred, if not anywhere from 1,000, 1,500 doors every other spring, Onalaskans like their services. They really are wedded to their services, and you're looking at someone who is really wedded to their services also. So I do not have a problem paying for the services that I receive in the city of Onalaska, the 30 years I've lived here. People really like their services, and it's a rarity. And as soon as I say this now, I'm going to get phone calls, but it's a rarity that I have someone at the door saying our taxes are too high, because they really want their services. One thing that probably could be very controversial, and I hate to say it out loud, but I will. But if you want more income, maybe we need to have a serious discussion of whether or not we should have ICE up at the Omni Center. And I know Alder Jurassic talked about, expansion, but maybe if we took that, and once again, do some type of internal numbers. And if we use the ICE space, year round for event space, would we be ahead? Would we, and conversations that I've had, or the indication that I have been led to believe is that, we could do well with that, but that's not for, discussion now, but I just wanted to at least just drop that and just, for a future discussion. Another concern that I would have with our current town of Onalaska fire contract, I believe it's a 30-year contract or 25, 30-year contract.
It's
I'm sorry,
5 years.
5, yeah.
5 year? Okay, I'm sorry, 5 year. One of my concerns would be if we were to, if either party were to say, okay, we went out in 5 years, what we've set that number. So we could maybe have a little bit of a problem. We set that number for fire, right? So
that is something we needed to learn more about. And there's also some innovation funds that we don't have a lot of information about related to the shared revenue legislation. And so the state is trying to incentivize actual cooperative public safety services. And so there are some separate funds designated for that. There just has not been a lot of information forthcoming. And so as we move through the budget process, we do hope to have more information on that.
okay, thank you. We always talk about that, we're out of space, out of land here in Onalaska, and that, we can't move, we can't go horizontally, but we can go vertically. So I know we've talked about that. I'm not really hot about, I'm with the mayor on this. I have grave concerns. We've had people come throughout the years that, as soon as they hear that something may be rezoned, right behind them, they put their entire retirement and all their money into their house, and people buy in to what their house was zoned and the area that they were zoned at. So I would have concerns about that. I'd certainly be willing to listen more what that might entail. And Amanda, you also talked about people wanting more services online and such. And I know when our previous city administrator, he and I worked closely together. He had originally talked about, he had kind of steered me toward the area of where all these communities throughout the state, they had all these newsletters, and they were online, they were doing all these great things. And I'll share that I was disappointed in the direction that it landed. I think it was just kind of like get it done and check off the list. And that was not the conversation that I had with our previous city administrator. It was supposed to be more of a website driven situation where people could, I don't know anyone who was going to look at our City of Onalaska web landing page every quarter, like, oh, where's the newsletter? It's like, I was looking, the thought process was more, someone was going to sign up for it and they would get delivered directly. And I realized Park and Rec, they send out quarterly, but that doesn't entail the entire City of Onalaska.
So our new website will have that functionality. You will actually be able to sign up. You'll be able to select whether you want to get text notifications or email notifications, and it will be a lot more interactive.
And that I 100% support. I mean, the work that is being done on our quarterly newsletter is so fantastic. And I think it's just a crying shame that it isn't shared to more people. I'd also like us to maybe investigate an app. Throwing it out there. I think that's all I have right now. Thank you, Your Honor.
You'll be asking for a QR code.
Sure, why not?
The new website will be mobile friendly.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, Stephen.
Okay, so my input for long-term budget solutions. 100% yes, I think we should be pursuing annexation options and also looking very strongly at the sick leave policy and long-term disability incentives.
Yeah.
Also looking, I think that's 100% yes on redevelopment incentives. Where I'm a maybe, but I want more information is on the transportation utility. I found that interesting. I haven't heard that before. I'd want to know more information before I can make a decision on it personally, though. Although roads are something 100% of our citizens use, whether or not they have a car or not. They get groceries, they get delivery of mail, they get delivery of packages, they have visitors, you name it. Everybody uses the roads, period. So I'd be interested in seeing that. That doesn't mean that I would support it, though. I just need more information. And where I'm on personally on the absolutely nots are the other new fees under streetlights, plowing, and fire service. Cities are supposed to provide services, and I would be a very, very hard sell if not an impossible one on those. Other area that I'm an absolutely no is eliminating single-family housing districts. I think that number one, this would be a breaking of promises in my mind. These things were zoned for a reason. People made lifelong decisions based upon the zoning. And for us to go back on that, I think is problematic just from a moral perspective. But from another one, I find it where it's going to be very counterproductive. If we start changing single family home zoning to a significant level, people have options. And I think you're going to see a flight of middle class and upper middle class families moving to Holman, Galesville, Trempealeau, Ettrick, because they want that experience and we're basically eliminating it for them. So I do not want that. I also have a concern on it on a larger scale. A couple administrations back, Housing and Urban Development came up with this concept of affirmatively furthering fair housing, and it's AFFH, and it's currently still on their websites if you take a look up. Although the current administration also has another term for it, it's called exclusionary zoning. And there is a very real threat already external to just the city saying maybe we should look at this, is that the federal government is very seriously considering under two of the last three administrations, basically telling cities they can no longer have any zoning authority at all, or if they want to continue to have it, then they forego their transportation or other funds. And that is what this affirmatively furthering fair housing and exclusionary zoning specifically refers to. So it's a threat that we need to be aware of anyway, but I don't want the threat to be coming internally as well. So I do not want to even look at that. Last concept, I guess, or last comment, I guess I should say is, before looking at any new utilities, referendums, or fees that we might want to consider as a council, again, I'm only the one vote. So I really think, if we have a budgetary necessity to where we have to go down one or more of those routes, that we really should get input from the citizens on where they would be most willing to feel the pain before we make that decision. That's it.
Okay, very good, Stephen. Okay, Amanda, do you want to say something? And then maybe we'll go around for comments again, and I can also ask staff again.
Yeah.
Or
so
what what more do you need or?
I guess I just have, one sort of question is I am hearing that some of you are interested in this idea of a transportation utility. Some of you don't like it. Would you like to learn more about it?
Yes.
Yes.
Is there sort of a general consensus that you would want to entertain more information and we could do that at a different date?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we just don't want to say no to something we don't fully understand or accurately understand.
Okay, so Jared and I will work on that and we will come back on a different date to talk about that. And then I am hearing some openness collectively to an operating referendum. Obviously, if we did that, we would go to referendum in 2024. It would not hit until 2025 if that were successful. Alternatively, we could go to operating referendum in 2025, Joanne. And that would hit in 2026. And so I guess, if that were an avenue we felt we needed to go down, how quickly do you want to go down it?
Okay, so let's keep with this system here and we'll start with Larry and there was two I guess we covered the
I
transportation.
think we're good on
So just
transportation. We
like
will come back.
more detail on where you're at with the referendum concept.
Thank
Larry,
you, Mayor. As far as the referendum, this year, I think it's gonna be a hard sell because everybody knows that the state just gave out $6 billion to all the communities. And then turn around and say, hey, we want more money yet. It's gonna be an awfully hard sell. As far as changing the zoning, my house is a very nice home, but my whole neighborhood is multi. I've been told by several realtors, to include myself, when I got the house, is that if it would have been a different neighborhood, the price would have been greatly higher. So changing the area of R1 to R whatever does change the value on the house, and I'm right now not really in favor of changing anything on that. Thank you, Mayor.
thank you. Dan?
I guess if we're approaching a referendum, as I think it would really behoove staff to make the case on this is what we think we're going to be short, and this is, I mean, we're not just going to raise taxes and have a referendum just because we were bored that day. So, I mean, there has to be a need established, and to Larry's point, if this year at least the city or the state looks like they may have filled those holes, then maybe we don't need to go that route. But if we do, I think out of all the choices, that's the first one I would approach. A couple comments on regarding the density and changing. I guess I'm a little confused because I mean things get rezoned all the time. We just went through the process, and there's always people that aren't going to like it. And I think there are neighborhoods where I think people are thinking that, you know, my next door neighbor is going to tear down their house and, you know, put a Starbucks or something like that. And that's probably not real practical. Within the last 30 days, I myself looked at a building on Main Street, and because it was zoned R1, my thought was to keep it as a rental and then potentially change it into my own commercial space. But because it was R1 only, and it's across the street from a bank and another business, it looked like it would have made sense to do something like that, but it wasn't an option. So I think there's a lot of places, and I kind of envision in the future, some areas like Main Street could be more of a multi-use. There could be more commerce and businesses, and at some point we're going to have to go up. Our community is going to change, and we need to be proactive in how we do that. So I just think that it's generally speaking, I like to have property owners give them more rights if that's the case, and I think we can zone that way. I'm not 100% wedded to it, but I think it warrants more discussion. And I think that anytime we can have a discussion about giving property owners more options, that's a good thing.
Okay, I think we should have Katie just weigh in on, just to make sure we're dealing with accurate information. If with the currently zoned R1 property, if you wanted to build a duplex on there, get it rezoned, what would your options be or not be?
So the bigger issue at hand, I would argue, is that a very large chunk of our community today is zoned R2. And R2 lets you outright have a single family home, a duplex, or a twin home, depending on the type of construction that's done. So a very large chunk of us today where we live are zoned R2. So there would be an example where you could take what's zoned R1 and let that be R2 and just have the opportunity, but know that there are certain setbacks that you need to have. So we say if you're going to do more intense development, you need a further side yard setback. So if you happen to have what the minimum is for a single family, for example, like a 6 foot, you wouldn't be able to convert your house to a twindo unless you were to remove a portion of your home. So there are other inhibiting factors. It wouldn't be something that you could just instantly do. There'd be questions of fire separation. You would have to pay fees in order to have your house reconstructed to add another unit. So while just talking about it theoretically, it may seem like, oh, you could have a lot of houses flipping, but if you don't have the density, if you don't meet the setbacks, it might not even be an option for you. It's more for some of our very large lots where there may be able to fit in an additional home or unit where we do not have one today. Just some food for thought.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Dan, did you have more? Are you done?
I think I had wrapped it up, so.
Okay, Leanne?
Okay, as far as the operating referendum, I wouldn't look at it as being something that we'd want to do in the spring. I agree with Alders Jurasik and Stevens as far as with the influx of money that's coming in. I don't think we want to do it now. Would I want to do it maybe in 2024? Sure, I think that we could look at it depending on our situation, depending on how we end up. So I would be fine with that.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. I don't, I want to have it on our minds as an option, but definitely right now with this shared revenue adjustment, we have a lot of details left to figure out. And, we have some success with collaborating with our neighbors. Maybe we can take some advantage of some of those innovation funds. And there's always new ideas coming forward, especially now that, we're all focused on it and we all know that we have energy that we want to spend watching for what other communities are successfully doing. So I definitely want to have it on the table, but not for this immediate discussion. Sean?
Thanks. And I agree with that same philosophy that everybody else has set up here. I'm a big proponent, especially with the school district, with our recent success with that, is getting huge community involvement and carrying the message very well on that. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Diane?
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, I missed that part. Oh, no, that was something else. Yeah, I agree. I think we need to finalize spending the ARPA money and seeing how this all works out with the new municipal dollars that we're anticipating receiving and how that's all going to work. I could see, like Mayor Kim said, to go ahead and keep it, be aware of it and kind of, if we have to be planning for it, but not for this next spring, no. I want to get back to this long-term sustainability. The city's sick leave policy is brought to my attention in the past year or so that it was felt that it's very generous. And I think we should be taking a hard look at that. I think it's very difficult to budget for that. Plus, from what I understand, it appears to be very overly generous. I think we should have a serious discussion about that. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Stephen?
Yeah, so the operating referendum, I would argue from my perspective would be an option of absolute last resort. And like Dan, I would like to know, why do we need it? I'd want to see hard fixed numbers that there's no other option before us other than to raise the levy. I'm not convinced we're there yet. And even if we were to go down that path, I think that it is very likely that that is a forlorn hope. Which is a term for a frontal assault against a well-defended fixed fortification, that the outcome is nearly the complete destruction of the attacking force. So I just don't see that it's probably even feasible that would pass, to be honest. Could be wrong, might be just in marketing and messaging, but even so, I see that as an absolute last resort, and I don't see a necessity for it right now.
It is a long-term strategy discussion. Okay, I don't want to get off. Are you done, Stephen?
I am.
Okay, let's just go back over. Larry, you're good. Dan, are you good? Dan's good.
No, I just have one thing that I'd like to ask, department heads. What do you have people that specialize in writing? And how much is that? I think that could be a source of. But you have to have. the right.
I think we can have Amanda answer that.
We do write a lot of grants. And if you want to talk to the department heads, in fact, I have one in front of me right now to review, which is a match grant for the fire department. Our problem is that major grants often require a component of need. So it often looks at the level of poverty that you have in your community. And the city of Onalaska is a very wealthy community. And so we are eliminated from a significant number of grants, especially for things like housing, based on that statistic. So it will consider the income of your community compared to a percentage of the income of the average state household. And we are above the average state household for income. We are also above the average county household for income. And so that eliminates a lot of grant opportunities for the city.
Did any other department heads want to chime in on the topic of grants, or did that cover the answer for you?
That does a good job, like community development block grants we've looked at. We all go to seminars and we see the consultant up there giving these presentations that show that they paid for $1 million street project where the village only paid 200,000 for it. And you start running the numbers, and we can't apply for principal forgiveness on a lot of our utility loans. If we try and get that on water and sewer loans or community development block grants, things like that, our median household income is too high. And we do actually probably don't toot our own horn enough, as many departments receive a lot of grants. Like right now, the Midwest Drive, we received 2 grants last year. The Midwest Drive project's getting STP urban money for approximately $650,000, and we got a discretionary grant that we competed statewide for $370,000 for the intersection of like PH and Theater Road. So that was a total discretionary one that we competed statewide and actually received it just as a transportation. I know Parks, the Park and Recreation Department applies for a lot of grants. A lot of our things we seek them out.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah,
Thank you.
another thing that has happened is through LAPC, some grants are available, but you have to have the project ready to go. And so you have to already be committed to the project before you can, and with money committed, before you can then start applying for grants. So you can't count on them on the front end. You have to try to get them on the back end of that.
Your Honor, since I skipped, could I do a take backsies? And I had a thought on the referendum.
Okay, let's let Sabrina go first.
I was just gonna add, we also get a lot of, excuse me, smaller grants as well, like Joanne just got a grant for elections. Police and fire both apply for smaller grants that we do get. But that's, a lot of that work is falling on the department head. They don't have someone in their department to be looking at grants and applying for grants on a regular basis. And my staff don't really have the time to be looking into that and knowing what's all going on. So we do approach grants seriously and try to apply for them. But it's not like someone's constantly looking at that, if that answers your question, Leanne.
Oh, it does. I just wasn't aware of the volume of grants that the city of Onalaska is actually doing.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Dan Stevens.
All
And then
right,
it'll be
I was,
next.
thank you, Your Honor. I was thinking about the since we're talking about long-term solutions, one of the benefits of doing a referendum would be to raise the future spending limit, I think, going forward. Am I understanding that correctly? If we went up a level, that sets the level new, and that potentially could solve some of the long-term problems that we have. And then, you know, I mean, a lot of work went into, you know, all these departments. And I'm, you know, I'm thinking we have, we were talking about the need for roads. That's something we're not going to be able to do in one swoop. So it might be two separate referendums. One would be in operating and one would be capital improvements. But if we wanted to take care of chip sealing, and then we could wrap that up. I have concerns that we have money committed to the community center and we're probably not going to be able to finish that, but a referendum might do that. I mean, the voters of Onalaska were very generous with the school district, and I potentially, if we can make the case and sell a tangible, this is what you're going to get for your money, we could address, we could potentially address some of the long-term problems by raising that spending limit and then taking care of some of the needs that, you know, we're scratching our heads on how we're going to pay for that. So with that said, we could make the case to go forward sooner rather than later. I don't know if the public would support it, but, you know, I mean, that's our job, is to address these issues. And I think that could potentially check those boxes.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, and I just want to say, when I said not that the referendum will be something in the future, but not for this year, it isn't because I don't think we have a need for it. I mean, with the departments having a 0% increase on their operating budget, like, there is definitely a need for it. And we have met, you know, we've met the budget this year with the extra money by continuing to still have them at zero, which can't be. That's the whole point of this conversation. That's not sustainable long-term. I'm just saying that with this shared revenue change, now is not, this moment is not the right moment for a referendum. Not that we don't need to have it long-term. Sean.
Oh, what was I? Oh,
I'm sorry.
no, referendum. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time that we had a referendum was the pool referendum, and it was an advisory.
As far as I know.
Mr. Wick, 2002-ish, three, because we opened in 5. And did it pass? I don't even remember. I was trying to find something. I couldn't find anything in the minutes.
It passed, but everyone criticized how we worded the question.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was, it was interesting. Yeah.
I don't want to do that
We
again.
had to so word to the wise, make sure that you read it like 50 times over, because we caught a lot of heat. Well, they really didn't understand it, because some people wanted it to fail, and then they blamed that. Some people on council said that we didn't word it correctly. Well, they were one of the voting bodies who approved it. So, so I believe that's the only referendum that I remember. I think the last school district referendum that did not pass, I just saw online, was 2002. And I have to commend the school district of Onalaska. They have continually, ever since then, have really done their due diligence and homework, and been very transparent, and really have involved the voting public as far as what's going on. And you've done a full wage campaign to the whole community about, you know, what are you getting? So, so I think people would be, it would be interesting. So at least the city of Onalaska does not have a history of trying to tap, but it would look a little suspect that, you know, we just got this money. And so I would only be for it if we could, obviously, and I would expect nothing less of us to have it all spelled out down to the penny practically, you know, what we would be using the money for, because that's what Onalaska does. So thank you.
Okay, Stephen.
Yeah, so on the referendum, just a couple comments. First off, yeah, this one would be different. This wouldn't be a referendum for a school. This wouldn't be a referendum for a pool, which are identified one-time cost or increased cost for a specific service that people decide they want. This would be ultimately a referendum for the taxpayers to trust their elected officials in spending their money on whatever the elected officials want to spend it on. I mean, that's not for an identified end state. It's just, we need more money. And so that's quite a different referendum, and I just don't see in my heart that that's probably going to pass very easily, number one. Number two, I do have a contrarian view. I don't think that raising the spending limits likely would improve our long-term financial strength. It would only improve our short-term. And now why do I say that? Well, using history as a guide, I think that in very short order, us elected officials would commit that money. And then next thing you know, within 3 or 4 years, oh my goodness, we're short. Well, no, do we do another referendum? I mean, this is the nature of things, folks. Let's be honest. This is what we do. So I think we need to live within our means. We need to find new revenue sources and make it happen. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to personally support a referendum anytime in the near future or long-term future. Not for me. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Amanda?
I'm just gonna put in a plug and Sabrina's gonna glare at me, but if we did decide to, fund a project like the community center and bond more over the next 2 years, that would increase our levy.
It would increase our levy for the capital side. So the city of Onalaska, in regards to our debt ceiling, we are way far from our debt ceiling. So we could fund that project, right? Without even asking the citizens of Onalaska, we could fund that project. It would be ideal to get their input, but we could definitely do that. And that would increase our levy, but it would increase it in the sense that our bond payments are going to go up because we're going to bond for more.
Thank you for that.
I don't think I need anything else unless anybody else wants to add anything, but I think we have a general direction.
Okay. Do any of the counselors have anything to add?
And since departments have had more than a 0% increase,
Decades.
I don't know of any time.
that's a pretty good commitment to living within your means. And at some point, I'm thinking if anybody were to run a business, I mean, would you say our expenses we're going to hold the line for decades? I mean, as a taxpayer, I would understand that sometimes you need to correct the situation for the future. And we've been asking our staff to do more with less for decades. And at some point, I don't think it's terrible to cut them a little bit of slack and just try to make it more manageable going forward.
Okay, Alder Wolf.
Thank you, Your Honor. Speaking of which, I know, I just remember all the years and Mayor Kim can, sure you remember this too, all the budget memos that we've gotten through the years from previously from mayors and then city administrator is 0%, 0%. I mean, I've been off and on council a couple different times, so there might've been years, but all I remember, I don't ever remember if it was not zero, but staff would know. And following up with Alder Stevens, as someone who is extremely frugal with my own money, but even more so with taxpayer dollars and other people's money, I just, for the first time in 16 years, went ahead and increased my, I didn't realize this till I found paperwork, 16 years, I just increased my home budget for just like day-to-day expenses. And then I only increased it like $75 for the month. So, and that includes gas and groceries and just not bills, but just how you live every day, but 16 years. So when I sit here and talk about that, I'm open to a referendum. If we can prove that, when I sit here and say, when we get to capital improvements or we approve whatever, that, is it nice but not necessary? I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just trying to be very respectful of what I was brought up on the dairy farm of the almighty dollars, how it was kind of pitched to me. And so that's where I'm always coming from. I know there's great needs on Alaska and I would like to be able to say yes to everything, but it comes down to choice at the end. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And then I'd also like to put out a reminder that, the levy limit is kind of an artificial thing that's tied to net new construction, which doesn't have anything to do with inflation and the, other challenges cost wise. Okay. Anybody at all have anything else they want to say before we close this topic? Anybody? Okay. All right, the mission is accomplished. We are on item 6, closed session. To consider a motion to convene in closed session under section 19, paragraph 85, paragraph 1, paragraph C of the Wisconsin statutes for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data on any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, specifically the contract for the city administrator. If any action is required in open session as a result of the closed session, the council will reconvene in open session to take the necessary action and or continue on with the printed agenda. Is there a motion?
Move to into closed session.
Motion by Stephen Knott, seconded by Larry Jurassic to go into closed session. Voting will be by roll call.
Sean McAllister,
Yes.
Dan Stevens, Stephen Knott,
Aye.
Leanne Stokes,
Aye.
Larry Jurassic,
I.
Diane Wolf.
Aye.
Voting was unanimous. We are in closed session. The time is 7:32. We'll have a short, brief break and then be back at it. Thank you, everyone.